I asked ChatGPT to show me my future. I'm now convinced I'll be dead in 3 days. I'm a usually big fan of AI technology, but after what I just found, I don't think any of us will be able to survive. The nightmare began when I stumbled across a new AI image generator, and within a few minutes it had me hooked. You give it a prompt and it will produce an image of that prompt. I had seen similar AI generators in the past, but what amazed me about this one is how specific the prompt could be. When I brought up the site, I sat long and hard thinking about the first prompt I wanted to give the generator. I thought back to around 3 months ago when my friend Jeremy was killed. He forgot to look both ways while crossing the road and was taken out by a semi-truck. Jeremy's death struck me hard because it made me realize how fragile life is. If Jeremy had only looked both ways, or if he had somehow known what was going to happen before it happened. I typed, "How am I going to die?" into the generator and hit enter. This was the biggest mistake of my life. I should have just closed the tab, but I didn't. The generator started loading and kept loading. It was taking a very long time, much longer than all the other prompts. I began to feel foolish, thinking I had finally managed to give it a broken prompt. I mean, of course I did. It had been a profoundly stupid prompt. However, it suddenly produced an image. It was an image of an old man in a yellow hat. I stared into the old man's frown, those sunken eyes and that pale complexion. It was horrifying, so I decided I had enough and closed the tab. My prompt had simply confused the generator and it had produced a random incoherent image. That's all. Obviously, an AI generator had no idea how I was going to die. However, I was wrong, and that old man would soon become my worst nightmare. The following day, I was running errands downtown and had quickly forgotten about the image from the night before. It had faded away from my memory like a bad dream. As I was walking to my car, I got this uncomfortable feeling that someone was watching me. When I looked back, I saw the old man in the yellow hat. It was unmistakably him. He had the same bright yellow hat, the same deep frown, the pale skin, and those horrible sunken eyes. He was across the street and he was staring at me, and his hands were opening and closing in a slow, violent motion. He began to walk towards me. He walked in a strange manner, like someone who had never walked before and was only just learning how. Like something that was only pretending to be human, pretending to wear an old man's face. I expected other people to react, but no one else seemed to notice him. People walked past him without giving him a second glance. As he crossed the road, I thought for sure he was going to get hit by a car, but he weaved right through traffic and no driver paid him any mind, not even a single honk. Morbidly, I thought of Jeremy getting hit by that semi. There was one other person that noticed him. It was a little girl who looked right at the old man and then began crying. The little girl's mom looked up to see if she could spot what had caused her daughter to become so distraught, but not once did her eyes land on the old man. He walked past her like a ghost, and as he got closer to me, that deep frown began to turn upwards into a horrible grin. I immediately got in my car and drove straight home. On the way back, I told myself I had only been seeing things, that there was no way he could be real. When I got home, I immediately locked all the doors and bolted into my room. I brought up the AI generator and again asked it, "How am I going to die?" I needed the generator to produce a new image. I needed it to show me that the image of the old man had just been a random image it had conjured and that now it would do that again. I needed it to prove that ChatGPT had no way of knowing how I was going to die. My thoughts were cut short when it produced the same image of the old man. This was impossible. How could the AI possibly know the future? I asked it again and it gave me the same image. I asked it about 50 more times and every time it was the same image of the old man in the yellow hat. I got up to grab my phone so that I could call the police, but I was interrupted by a banging on my window. There, plastered against the window, was the face of the old man in the yellow hat, his sunken eyes staring directly into mine. That malicious grin spread wider, his teeth long and discolored. But what was even more terrifying was what was reflected in those cold, dead eyes. I quickly backed away, heart racing, and made my way to the door. But just as I was about to reach it, I froze. From under the door, a faint yellow light began to seep in. And then the sound, a deep rhythmic humming, like a lullaby gone wrong. The handle slowly began to turn. I retreated, searching for an escape. But then I remembered. The AI generator. Maybe it knew how to escape this nightmare. I rushed to the computer and with trembling fingers I typed, "How can I escape the old man?" It loaded for what felt like hours, and then an image appeared on the screen. It was a silhouette of a young man and what looked to be a larger figure standing next to him. As the rest of the image loaded, I immediately knew what it was. It was me, sitting in front of that exact computer and the old man in the yellow hat standing right behind me. My girlfriend answers one question every night in her sleep. I think she just confessed to mass murder. When I met my girlfriend, I thought she was perfect. Our relationship moved really quickly and it helped that we both enjoyed eating each other out. I started sleeping at her place after about 2 weeks of seeing each other. Everything about her was normal. That was until the first night that we stayed together, however, where I discovered her horrifying secret. What happened was one of those things that you just can't shake off easily. I was laying in bed next to her reading on my phone when she rolls over and looks me dead in the eye. She doesn't say anything, she just looks at me. "Hi," I said to her. "Ask me a question," she responded. I chuckled when she asked me that, thinking it was just a cute exchange. But she reached out and squeezed my arm. I winced. "Hey, that hurts." She didn't let go. Okay, do you like sleeping together?" I asked. "Yes," she said, rolling back over to go to sleep. It was such a surreal experience and so random. Obviously, I brought it up the following day with her, but she swore that she didn't remember. I even showed her a small bruise I had on my arm from where she had grabbed me. She still didn't remember, and we kind of laughed it off, although I could tell bruise had really bothered her. The next night, the same thing happened. I thought she was asleep, and then suddenly she rolled over and started looking in my eyes again. "Ask me a question," she said. "Do I have to?" I asked. "Yes." She rolled back over. Apparently her logic worked the same way as any of my elementary school teachers. "Hey, are you just messing with me? Only one question per night," she said. It sounds benign, but her tone had a sense of finality to it. I was afraid to attempt another question. The next week or so passed by without any terrible incidents. Every night she would roll over and prompt me for a question, and each night I would offer some innocent inquiry just to satisfy her. I would ask if she had enjoyed the restaurant or if she was tired. Small things like that. Strange as it was, I was happy and didn't see the reason that this strange sleep-talking gimmick should upset me too much. My sleep was taking a pretty big hit, however, and each night I felt like I was slipping farther down into a permanent lack of energy, as if my battery was losing capacity. There was one night in particular where I felt extremely tired and fell asleep before her. I woke up sometime in the night with her hand gripping my arm, asking me for another question. "Not tonight," I said. "Go back to sleep." "You have to ask a question," she said. Frustrated, I tried to shut her down with an absurd question. "Fine. When will I die?" "After me." She rolled away as I sat up. The way she had said those words, my body immediately broke into a cold sweat and my stomach turned over. "What did you say?" I asked angrily. "One question." "No, not tonight." I grabbed her. I didn't want to hurt her, I was just so frustrated and admittedly pretty scared. I started to shake her. "Not tonight, you need to tell me what is going on. Why are you doing this to me?" I was yelling loudly at this point. She didn't respond immediately until suddenly she turned and pushed me. My mind almost expected some kind of supernatural strength, but ultimately it was my balance that got me. With my knees tucked under me and sitting on the edge of the bed, there was no way to stop my fall. I tumbled backwards, getting shrimped between the bed and the wall. I stood up, yelling even more, but she had already turned back over in bed. I finally started grabbing a few pieces of clothing and went out the door. I had been staying with her for a while and had only been back to my apartment during the day occasionally. I finished the night of sleep there, shaking with anger. She called me in the morning asking where I had gone. I tried to explain to her what had happened, and I think it scared her more than it did me. "I pushed you out of the bed?" she asked. "Yeah, right into the wall," I said. "This has to stop. I don't really know what it is, but it has to stop. I'm happy with you, but I don't know. I feel like I'm getting chipped away at, even when the nights are peaceful. I'm scared," she said. We decided to sleep apart for the night. I think she wanted us to at least see each other so I could comfort her, but I was mostly thinking of myself. I was extremely relieved to be apart, and hadn't realized the full extent of the stress I had been under. I even went to bed much earlier than usual and settled in for what I hoped would be a questionless night. I woke up. The clock said it was 3:22 a.m. I wasn't sure why I woke up. I didn't hear anything, all the lights were off. I even flicked on the lamp but didn't notice anything. I wasn't sure anything had happened at all. I was still mostly asleep, but suddenly felt a little guilty over the whole situation. Maybe I had overreacted, and I worried about how upset I may have made her. I grabbed my phone to send her a text. She had already sent me one. "Ask me a question," it said, time-stamped at 3:21 a.m. The text had woken me up. I quickly turned off my phone as if that would make any difference. I was in a cold sweat again, fully awake. I barely had time to process what I had just seen before my phone started ringing. It was her. No chance I was going to answer the phone. All of it started to feel like a sick joke, and I quickly lost my earlier feeling of guilt. I shut down my phone completely and struggled to go back to sleep. I felt like all I needed was one day and night of rest. 3:52 a.m. A knock at my door woke me up and I almost peed myself. I knew it was her, and my fear grew without limits as I walked to the front door and looked out. There she was, beautiful but ghostly, somewhere she shouldn't be, standing in the hallway patiently. I held my head against the door trying to decide what I should do. I didn't open the door but decided to try my luck. "How can I make this stop?" I asked as loudly as I could. "You can't," she said. I looked back out the peephole and she was gone. I whipped open the door and stepped into the hallway. She was walking towards the elevator, seemingly unaware that I was even behind her. I almost asked her to stay, worried about her traveling in this weird state, but selfishly I let her go. I even had the horrible thought that if something did happen to her, at least that would solve things for me. The next day she asked how the night had gone and I lied, telling her that everything had been fine. In her own words, the night before, I couldn't stop it, but I could at least try to control it or understand it. The next few weeks I barely slept and I tried so many different questions and none of the answers were exactly comforting. "Why can't I stop it?" She said it was inevitable. "Have you done this to anyone else?" She said no. "Do you want to hurt me?" She said no. "Can you lie?" She said no again. I may have wasted a question. What did I expect her to say? I tried as many things as I could think of, but no questions about the process seemed to gain me any ground. Each night I lost another little piece of myself, and I think there were some weeks I didn't really sleep at all, getting maybe 5 hours total across the whole span. Exhausted one night after weeks of trying, I tried something different, something much more specific. "What is the number of days exactly that we will be in a romantic relationship after today?" 112, she said. The next night, another question. "What is the reason our romantic relationship ends?" "I die," she said. Each night I dug deeper. "What will your cause of death be?" "Starvation." "What will my cause of death be?" "Electrocution." "Where will you die?" "Nearby." "Can I keep you from dying?" "Yes, so the future can be changed." "Yes." "How can I stop you from dying?" "Don't kill me." Her words sent me into a lasting panic. I understood what she was telling me, but for all my exhaustion and despair, I kept trying. I searched for more and more clarification, but her answers always had a way of remaining just a little too vague. 6 more times I had tried to sleep in another place, even once staying in a hotel without telling her which one it would be. She showed up out of thin air in the middle of the night, knocking on my door. I called a few people looking for solutions. I called doctors and even a psychic, but my heart wasn't truly in the search. My mind had fallen on an idea a while back, and although it filled me with shame, I couldn't get it out of my mind. She tried to help, but there wasn't anything she could do. Our relationship was slowly falling apart during the day, and it was difficult for her to understand the true gravity of the situation. I also refused to share many of the details with her because I knew it would scare her even more. I tried to continue my investigation, but over time I was just looping back around to the same questions, having forgotten many of her responses. I should have written them down, but each night the sleep deprivation piled up and kept me from thinking clearly. At some point I know I finally tipped the scales towards insanity, and I'm ashamed of what I did next. A sense of clarity came over me once I accepted it, and I hate myself, but I was almost excited to ask her my next question. Where could I hide your body so that no one finds it? The hatch near your old campsite. I knew exactly where she had mentioned. There was a small area in the woods near my parents' old house with just enough flat ground for a tent. You would never find it if you didn't know it was there. But a 5-minute walk from the campsite brought you to a hatch with its doors usually covered in dirt and grass. It opened up into a small cellar. The next day, I surprised my girlfriend with a camping trip. Our relationship had really reached its last leg, and I explained that it would be nice to take a break and get away for a while. We enjoyed our day together, and honestly, I forgot temporarily about the horrible things left to do. She deserved so much better. Night came, and we sat in front of the fire, her head resting on my shoulder as she fought off sleep. She couldn't see me, but I was crying, and hoping that she wouldn't fall asleep so I could stay in that moment. "I'm sorry," she said, almost asleep. "It's okay. We're going to figure it out." I sat there with her for a little while longer, hoping that I would change my own mind. I whispered. Too late. She was asleep. I picked her up out of her chair and carried her off into the woods. I finally found the old hatch and laid her down on the ground near it. It took a while to finally pry it open, pushing away years of dirt and leaves with my arms and feet. I had a new padlock in my hand that I had brought with us. I lifted her again and walked down with her into the cellar, placing her down again in the center of the room. I sat down against the far wall of the cellar and somehow drifted off to sleep. I woke up to her standing in front of me. In that moment, I finally started to think of the person in front of me as someone completely different than the woman I had met. I had to get rid of whatever this thing was. It was ruining my life, and I knew if I didn't that it would be the end of me. I stood up and pulled the knife I'd been hiding out of my pocket and showed it to her. "Will she know that I loved her?" I asked. "Yes," she said. Whenever we turn 18, we get the name of our soulmate. I just figured out the horrifying reason why. I was young when I realized that the place I lived was special. I didn't realize it at first since I had lived there my whole life. I thought it was normal for a city to not allow pets. I grew up never hearing the sounds of barking dogs or hissing cats. No one that lived inside the city border was allowed to have them. I thought it was normal for cities to have mandatory blood testing every week, with no explanation or seemingly any reason. I thought it was normal for cities to not have any jails. I thought it was normal for cities to give their citizens soulmates. I never really understood how it worked. All that we were told was that there were the matchmakers who were responsible for making the matches and sending out the tiny slips of paper that determined each citizen's love life and future. No one ever saw the matchmakers. No one knew how they were recruited. No one knew how they worked. All anyone knew was that it worked. Where I lived, there has never been a filing for divorce. The matchmakers are never wrong. Each citizen received their paper on their 18th birthday. Inside the piece of paper there was nothing except a name, the name of your supposed soulmate. There was no telling how you would come across this person, no when or how. All anyone knew was that it would eventually happen. We were allowed to tell other people, allowed to ask around, try and seek out people that had the same name as the one on the paper, but it didn't matter. It couldn't be forced. Of course, literal eternal love and happiness does not come without rules. Every citizen had to follow the rules. They weren't too strange and seemed like a small price to pay for what you were getting in return. Most of the rules were simple. To name a few, there was no going outside under any circumstances after 2 a.m. No pets, blood tests, etc. There were also rules that we weren't allowed to know until we were older. We got the new rules on our 18th birthday, the same day we got our matchmaker paper. We called them slips. As I got older, I realized that our city was special, and that other cities didn't have what we had, but I didn't care. Life was good, life seemed simple. Our city was like a little paradise. It was happy. It was without issue. Vertical bar, vertical bar. It was the night before my 18th birthday and I couldn't sleep. This was to be expected, since knowing that the next morning you would know the name of your literal soulmate was enough to keep anyone up late. Usually I wouldn't have believed in such things like soulmates, especially as I got older, but it was hard to argue with evidence. My parents had gotten married in their late 20s and have stayed happily married ever since, both of their names matching what was on their slips. My older sister Caitlin got her slip last year, and though she's been through her fair share of failed relationships, she's currently in a happy one with some guy named Roger. I don't think I need to tell you the name that was on her slip. I wished Caitlin still lived with us. We used to share a room, but ever since she moved out, it feels empty with just me in it. By some miracle, I eventually fell asleep, my brain finally exhausted after hours of wondering what tomorrow was going to bring. I woke up the next morning, my arm groping for my alarm to turn it off just like any other day. It wasn't until I sleepily sat up that I realized that today wasn't like any other day. I swung my legs out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to compose myself. I wanted to pull on a shirt and shorts as fast as possible, rush to the kitchen to get the envelope I knew would be addressed to me, but I didn't. I didn't want to be one of those people whose entire lives suddenly revolved around trying to find their soulmate. I needed to be calm. Taking a few even breaths, I slowly put on a shirt and some basketball shorts before opening my door. Chatter, and the smell of waffles hit my senses instantly as I stepped out of my room. Turning the corner, I stopped, grinning. "Catelyn," I said, unable to contain my excitement at seeing her. Reaching her in a few short steps, I wrapped my arms around her in a hug, to which she enthusiastically returned. "What are you doing here?" I said, pulling myself away to look at her. "Oh, you seriously thought I would miss your birthday? Get real," she said, matching my grin as she looked at me. "Damn, you got tall," she said, looking at me. "He got it from his old man," my dad chimed in, and Catelyn rolled her eyes. Besides my height, I got a lot from my dad. I got his warm brown eyes, and I got his wavy, dirty blonde hair that I had always kept medium length. I looked so much like my dad that my mom always chimed in saying how I got her nose and smile. "Happy birthday, hun," my mom said from the counter, giving me a soft smile. "These are almost done, and we'll go out for your birthday dinner later tonight," she said, gesturing at the waffles, and I smiled. "Birthday waffles for the birthday boy," my dad chimed in, putting an arm around my mom, and the simple movement made me remember something I forgot in the midst of the excitement. Is it here?" I asked them, trying to keep my voice even. My sister nodded, understanding what I was talking about. "On the front table." My legs felt like rubber as I walked the few steps into the hallway, instantly seeing the stark white envelope on the table. I picked it up. Vertical bar, delivered to Theodore Shillings. Vertical bar. I walked back to the kitchen, all eyes on me as I turned the envelope over, trying to act calm, act normal. I opened the envelope, pulling out 2 pieces of paper. One of them I knew would be the new rules. The other one was my slip. I looked at the bigger paper first. To peoples registered as 18 years as older, the following rules will come into effect. 1. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted in city waters. This includes all local rivers within city limits. 2. Under no circumstances will anyone 18 years or older be allowed to watch the television on the 14th of every month. 3. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted to use faucets after 12 a.m. This includes sinks, bathtubs, and showers. 4. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted to use any kind of elevator after 9 p.m. 5. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted to share their rules with people under the age of 18. And that was it. I honestly expected more, but was relieved there wasn't too many that I would have to memorize. They were weird, sure, but nothing that I wouldn't be able to do. After rereading the new rules, I put the paper down, heart hammering as I took my slip. Wanting to get it over with, I opened it, to which a single name was printed. Avery, I read, and reread the name several times. Avery, Avery, Avery. I racked my brain for people I knew named Avery. There was a girl in my history class, and maybe one who I had pre-calc with a few years ago. Before I could wonder further, Catelyn's voice cut me off. "What's the name?" she said, to which I handed it to her. It passed from her, to my mother, then my father. "Avery. Nice name," my dad said, handing my slip back to me. Chatter resumed between my parents and Catelyn while my mind was whirring. Some things made more sense now, like why I never saw adults kayaking in the river like I saw them do in other cities. I had told myself for a long time that once I got my slip that I wouldn't focus too much on it. But my mind kept coming back to the name that was burned into my mind. Avery. I still had to go to school, and got ready while Catelyn went out to reconnect with some high school friends. I ignored my texts asking what the name on my slip was, preferring to have that conversation in person. My friends were waiting for me at the bus stop eagerly. There was Jennifer, who was usually pretty quiet, and who I'd known since preschool. There was Joseph, who was a bit of a daredevil and a jock who I'd met during my freshman year. Lastly, there was Charles and Sophia, twins who were never separated, and who I'd bonded with sophomore year over our love for horror movies. Looking at us as a group looked weird, but we worked and had fun with each other. I was bombarded with the same question as I got close to them. "Whose name did you get?" "Avery," I said the first time I had actually said the name. It sounded nice coming out of my mouth. It sounded right. My friends nodded, followed by a moment of silence that meant that they were all trying to think of Averys that we knew. "Isn't there a chick in your history class named Avery?" Joseph offered, and I nodded. "Yeah, I'm trying not to think about it too much. I don't want to become one of those people who become obsessed with it," I said, although the name was really all I could think about. My friends dropped it after that, all except Joseph. He would chime in every few minutes, rattling off girls that he knew, all with the name Avery. He was still talking about it as the bus came, and as we walked up to the school, he really didn't have an off button, which meant that I was left to try and tune him out, nodding my head in agreement every few minutes.
Mary, Mary, waiting here for you. It's the last thing